Where to start when you're introducing a film that probably isn't the most talked about, just the most talked about science fiction film ever made. It's probably one of the most talked about films ever made. It has been studied by every kind of critical theory you can think of, every single academic discourse, and that's outside of film theory. I'm not going to go into any of that. Just to say that the philosophical, spiritual, ethical issues that Blade Runner invites you to think about are all told in the opening scroll that opens the movie. That invites you to think about it. One of the stills said, and it's a quote, has so much allegory, it will keep stoners up for nights for years. And that's what did happen. When it came out, it was scheduled as one of summer's 1982's prime contenders. It was working, you'd see pictures of Officer and Gentleman, Poltergeist, Wrath of Khan, other films all of that summer. E.T. was the big film that summer. Of course, they were Reaganite, optimistic, sunny. The neoconservatism was sweeping the country. There was one film that set a new standard for nihilism and set a new standard for special effects, and that was, now up on the screen would have been a picture of John Carpenter's The Thing. Now, that flopped, not quite as classic as Blade Runner, but over the years it has been recognised as a true classic. And the other one was Blade Runner. Director Ridley Scott was coming off this little-known film, should have been a picture of Alien, and Harrison Ford was coming off these little-known films, should have been a picture of Star Wars: The Empire Strikes Back and Raiders of the Lost Ark. When Blade Runner started filming, he'd just come off Raiders, just stopped filming, and Spielberg recommended him to Ridley Scott. When they were filming, Raiders came out and of course made him a megastar. He was the only one out of the Star Wars saga that made it as a star outside of the Star Wars movies. Now, Blade Runner, based on a book by Philip K. Dick, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, the producers knew that in its original form, and the reason why it's so mythical, one of the reasons it continues to be so mythical, is that there is so many different versions of it, about 7. The version that they put into release at the cinema, they forced Harrison Ford to come back and give it a voiceover, which he hated doing because they felt it was a little incoherent, and they tacked on a happy ending using outtakes from Stanley Kubrick's The Shining. Now, this is absolutely outrageous. It takes away. Well, it's just awful. It just takes away everything that. Well, anyway. It's just awful, yeah.
It's bad.
Now, it floundered at the box office. It was not a flop, contrary to popular belief. It didn't do very well, but it did do some business. But then it was sort of, completely forgotten. Then it was released on home video. Right about now, 31 years later, and Blade Runner would still impress if it was brand new today. This is a CGI age, and after the opening crawl, where they tell us where they are, it always gives me a shiver down the spine. It's absolutely fantastic. The sound, the score by Vangelis, who the year before had won his Oscar for Chariots of Fire score for that. The sounds that the space objects make, it's just fantastic. It's just fantastic. And this is from someone who doesn't particularly like science fiction as a genre. What could have been done on computers would have been done, but this is painting, craftsmanship. It has a warmth that present CGI drains from all science fiction. And also, there was a picture, I wouldn't need to look at this. The streets in Blade Runner, pyramids, like they indicate hierarchical society. It seems to be the more higher up you go, the more money, the more associated you have. Why do the streets look simultaneously empty and crowded? And these questions aren't answered in any of the versions. Why are people living off Earth? Is it post-apocalyptic? It's set in Los Angeles 2017. when the final cut, and this is slightly polished by Ridley Scott, it's essentially the director's cut with it going through a very deep cleansing product. Came out in 2009. I watched it and someone said Los Angeles 217 and they can't even finish Cabot Circus. It's highly influenced in visual design by Fritz Lang's Metropolis. So what you're going to have to do is go home and put Metropolis into Google and just see how much the city was based. Woody Allen would entitle his 1992 film his tribute to Expressionism, Shadows and Fog. And that's what Metropolis is essentially. It's sci-fi expressionism, a form of art that started after World War I in Germany. Very, very dark, very atmospheric, with shadows painted on, everything murky. This was then adopted by film noir, post-World War II, where you have a femme fatale, an ambiguously moral hero, just like Blade Runner. Essentially, a lot of film noir had voiceover as well, so the first kind of cut is very much like film noir. The beginnings of its cult were quick. Sci-fi magazines and fans were quick to defend it. They bemoaned the loss of the original cut, and gradually over the next 10 years it just grew and grew and grew and grew until Ridley Scott released the director's cut. What you would be seeing now is a series of images of films that owe something to it. And that is basically every science fiction film made since has stolen from Blade Runner. Tim Burton's City of, what is it, his Batman film's Gotham City. Tim Burton's Gotham City, I'm sorry, but Tim Burton's Batman films in the early 90s are way superior to the awful po-faced post 9/11 tedium of Christopher Nolan's trilogy.
Tell it like it is,
I
Legend.
always do. I'm sorry, it's just that's a real work of art, and you go and see something like this, it's miserable people walking around. It's not like the original comic strip. Now I've gone off on one now, look what you've done. It's not like the original comic strip. The original comic strip is just like Burton's movies. The director's cut came out, it was huge, again. They'd cut out the happy ending from Outtakes with The Shining, they kept the ambiguous ending, they'd taken out the voiceover, there were other bits they took out. A guy at that time happened to be looking for a print of something else, and he came across a copy of the work print, which was shown once to a test audience, went down disastrously, and that's why they cut it as much as they did. He then fiddled around with that, put that out, so that's one cut, there's another cut. It differs in shots, editing, dialogue, quite a lot. That's why there's like 7 cuts of it, which you can all buy in a box set. Then it was universally recognised as the film it is, and yeah, like I said, it is the most influential film of the last 35 years, there is no doubt about it. Not going to bother to talk about Harrison Ford, because you all know what happened to him. Rutger Hauer, there would be a picture of him without his shirt. I know, I wanted to do that. Like Verhoeven, he came to Hollywood. He started out in his native Netherlands making films with Paul Verhoeven, and then he was in Verhoeven's first US film, Flesh and Blood. Everybody remembers him as the Hitcher, and he's worked steadily ever since. Sean Young as Rachel. Young was a very, very talented, very, very beautiful actress, who gives a really, really incredible performance here. She went on to star in some really, really big films of the 80s and 90s that should be appearing. No Way Out with Kevin Costner, The Boost with James Woods. Unfortunately, fortunately, Young was an actress who stood up for herself. She didn't get on with Harrison Ford and happily told the press afterwards, what a prick. She didn't get on with Kevin Costner and happily told the press afterwards. She didn't get on with James Woods. In fact, they had an affair on the set of one of the films she was doing, and he accused her of leaving a voodoo doll of him and his girlfriend outside his house. That actually took her to court. She should have become a household name with Tim Burton's Batman. She broke her arm while filming a scene, while practicing for a scene that was ironically cat horse riding. So literally they were just about to start filming, so she lost out on the role of Vicky Vale, which went to, of course, Kim Basinger. The following year, again, she was cast as Tess Trueheart, Dick Tracy's sweetheart in Dick Tracy. And she was Dick Tracy. She was where Madonna was the femme fatale. She was the good girl. She was kicked off the set after 2 weeks with the usual creative differences cited. Young immediately told the press it's not unusual in this business to get sexually harassed by Warren Beatty. Tell him to fuck off, and it's a whole different story. Okay, and yes, of course, Daryl Hannah. She was starting out here. It's kind of a dual role. She has to be childlike and naive, and she has to be incredibly dangerous as well. Then there would be a picture, of course, as Daryl Hannah in which film?
Slash.
Of course. She became America's sweetheart, ethereal, lovely, beautiful, and she more or less held that position until Julia Roberts in 1992, Pretty Woman. She's a limited actress. She struggled in Oliver Stone's Wall Street. Sean Young was also in Wall Street and apparently didn't know that she was walking around the set with I am a C word stuck on her ass that Charlie Sheen posted on it every day. And they hated her so much they cut her out. Remember her darker side. Quentin Tarantino cast, remembering her from Blade Runner, how good she was, he cast her as Elle Driver, Bill's second in command in the Kill Bill films. And I can't remember what the last still was I was going to end on. I think it was a quote from Time Out. It said something like, Tony Scott's film in its earliest incarnation was a flawed masterpiece. Now, quite simply, it is a masterpiece. Enjoy the film.